Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning. How you doing? Maybe we'll do a radio show. Yeah, that's what we should do. It's Monday, July 18th, 2022. That's the proper date for doing a radio show, I believe. So it's a good day to begin. How was your weekend? How did everything go? Everything seems to be fine at Netroots Radio. That is nice. I'm being calm. Entering into the week, knowing that there's another January 6th hearing coming. And it's coming on Thursday. And it's coming on Thursday night, which is a good thing, because one, it doesn't interrupt the show, and two, yes, I'm going to have to talk to Greg about this. We need another day here. We're going to be taking another personal day. Thursday, no live show. Housekeeping note for everyone here. And I'll have to remind Greg of that. Remind him by way of telling him for the first time, of course. But I will remind you that I'm doing that when I tell him for the first time. Well, maybe he's listening and he's already got it. Or I could use, this could have been an email, is basically what we're saying. Okay, fine. That's all right. Plenty to catch up on. There'll be even more. I'm glad that the hearing is happening at the end of the week. And by the way, the news is, and I guess we can end the show after I deliver the news, is that this may not be the last one. This was supposed to be the big wind-up to the series of hearings, but I guess they're getting such terrific ratings on TV that there's word that even after this prime time, 8 p.m. on Thursday, prime time wrap up to the series of hearings may not be the last hearing. More witnesses are emerging, more storylines being developed, and of course, it's getting pretty bad out there. And it's getting pretty bad for Trump and his minions, too. It's actually hurting him. Greg's got some information around surrounding that and some word on the pollings. And the pollings, that's plural. And what's happening, and is it sinking in? Is it affecting people's view of whether or not they're, comfortable voting for Trump should he run in 2024. So it's making a dent, and that's good. I'm glad to have the stories being told, and they're developing the plot lines and connecting dots, and it's all very good. So I'd be pleased to find out that there may be a second series of hearings, and I think it's a smart thing to do. I was a little worried, for all the praise we've given the committee, and it's deserved, for breaking from the traditional framework of hearings and not doing the everybody gets 5 minutes to ask questions of the witness, and it's the same questions over and over again, perhaps restated in certain ways, or someone speechifies for 5 minutes and then gives the witness no chance to answer. This sort of thing, that they went with a more open, long format questioning by one member or staffers, etc., and of course interspersing all of the answers and question lines with previously taped deposition footage that helps make the point and set things up. It's been very interesting. And so I guess it shouldn't surprise us not only that they've broken format with when they hold the hearings, either in the morning, during the week, or prime time, etc., that they are looking possibly to break the pattern of, with these sorts of things, investigations, whether it's investigations or legislation. They very frequently say, well, once July rolls around, they start looking towards the August recess, which means that, of course, nothing would happen during the August recess, but then also very little happens during the July run-up to the August recess, and that means that in June they start thinking about the August recess because July is coming, and that's the time when you start planning for it, and then, of course, May, the way these things creep into the calendar, and you stop doing the work. And, of course, I think it would be a huge mistake to let the story about all of their lies lie in between now and the election, especially with the summer coming to kind of erase our memory of these things. True, they get covered in the newspaper all the way through, but there's been something about these hearings that have been extraordinary, and I think that they should extend it into the campaign season. And I guess they're starting to think about that possibility, because that's the word. Not only would there be a second possible series of hearings, but that may stretch all the way to almost election time, which I think would be the smart thing to do. So, okay, that's good news. We'll hear a little bit more about that, I am sure. Other news, I just happened to, just as I was coming onto the air with the show, picked up another crazy gun story. Not a gun fail story in the traditional sense, but SFDB, our friend SFDB, who watches these incidents closely and has a whole separate genre of people just inappropriately producing weapons, inappropriately drawing weapons, not firing them, so they don't make it past the gun fail threshold, but they are in fact fails in terms of how people are handling the guns. So it really deserves its own genre, and I don't know what to call it, but I guess Greg does. But anyway, just a quick hit from the story that they brought around. This one is from Connecticut, just like Greg. Well, Greg is from New York, but he's living in Connecticut and has been for about 150 years. It feels like probably at this point, but all pleasantly past, of course. So we call him Dem from Connecticut. This person is much younger and is from Connecticut. I don't know whether they're originally from Connecticut. The news is from Hamden, Connecticut, unless it has some weird local pronunciation that I don't know about. But quick story, long story short, this is a great armed society is a polite society story, and this goes to prove their point. They're always getting their points proven so well, the gun folks. The silent behind-the-scenes note from Greg, it's pronounced Paris. Okay, very good. But in Hamden, and, if you're looking for polite society, a good place to go, I think, would be where this took place, the Family Dollar store in Hamden, Connecticut. I'm guessing it's not it's not the country club exactly. Anyway, the point is that 25-year-old Joshua Murray was charged with carrying a pistol without a permit, or a pistol without a permit. Either way, I've told you can say it either way, he says to me. Anyway, carrying a pistol without a permit, but also brandishing the weapon in front of other people. Why, though? And the answer is because, as a polite person, he held the door open for two women who were coming to visit the Family Dollar store, but they failed to say thank you. That's right. He failed to say thank you for his holding the door, and so he thought the appropriate punishment would be to have their lives threatened with his pistol. Drew the gun in front of everybody and told, I guess must have made it clear. It's not clear in the way the story is reported in the New Haven Register exactly what was said, but we imagine that he said at some point, otherwise they couldn't report the story this way. The reason I'm pointing this pistol in your face is you did not say thank you to me for holding the door. And as you know, an armed society is a polite society, and that means that you're supposed to draw your arms to enforce etiquette. That's the correct use of the handheld instant death machine. So way to go, Joshua Murray. Excellent job. 25 years old and hasn't really learned that lesson yet. But I guess it'll be taught to him by the Superior Court there in the Hamden, Connecticut area. Meanwhile, Greg Dworkin is here, and he's superior to any court in Connecticut or anywhere else, as far as I'm concerned. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. We're just fine.
Good.
There's a movie called Kill Bill. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a kung fu classic starring David Carradine and Uma Thurman. Yes. And part of the many subplots in the movie is that there's a priest of the White Lotus who happens on the road to pass a monk from the Shaolin Temple. And the priest subtly nods, which is unheard of given his status, and the monk ignores him. And so the priest feels obligated to wipe out the entire Shaolin Temple, which he does, and thereby becomes a kung fu legend. Wow. And I heard the story of the guy who opened the door, and, the women didn't acknowledge him, and I'm thinking, I've seen this movie.
Well, there's now going to be snakes and swords and the whole bit, and everybody's very excited. People learn their lessons from the movies and TV. That was another thing I happened to notice today in the Twitter machines, but we'll save that for a later time.
So we'll absolutely positively get to the January 6th committee.
You bet.
As a matter of fact, the pundit roundup today, my headline was, the January 6th hearings matter for a variety of reasons, which we will prove.
Yes.
But before we do that, of course, we're going to start off like we did on Thursday, taking a look at they'll always be in England and what's going on with the prime minister fight. And again, we do this because the parallels are just extraordinary between what's going on there and what goes on here. So I sent you a picture, a screen cap, if you will, of The Spectator. The Spectator is basically National Review Online if they had talented writers. So it's very conservative. And just to give you a flavor of that, here are some of their most popular headlines. The heat wave, green hysteria is out of control.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Whisper it, but we're allowed to enjoy the heat wave, says another columnist. Right?
It's a hell of a thing.
Just to give you an idea where they're coming from. And that's why
they're
basically unreconstructed Thatcherites.
Yeah.
Who got all in behind Boris Johnson and are really upset that Johnson's out. So that's where they're coming from, and that's why it's so much fun to read. It's like reading about a Yankee win in the Boston Globe.
Okay. Yeah, it's we've forgotten to mention that they're having a tremendous heat wave there, and I have seen in the last couple of days people have been scolding the local papers like, you're illustrating this, potentially very dangerous heat wave with pictures of people at the beach. Like, it's not beach weather.
Right. Well,
when it's
I have a better one,
Celsius.
a political cartoon that I think I saw our friend D. Oliver post at Daily Kos. It's basically, you can imagine this Australian sun in the background dominating the sky, this orange sky. And they have 6 different podia with the 6 candidates running for prime minister leadership.
Okay.
With 6 skeletons at the podium.
Yeah.
And the caption is something along the lines of prime minister candidates discuss the heat wave. And it's pertinent for a variety of reasons. Remember, these are all conservatives who are trying to deny climate change. But the general view of The Spectator and others is that these 6 candidates are simply not charismatically up to the task of being leader. And so that's why following this is so interesting. And again, the infighting here is incredibly fierce. We discussed one of the columns, at least on Thursday. This one, ditching Boris was a terrible mistake. The Tory party has made a terrible mistake, one they'll regret bitterly. When they're soundly beaten at the next election, naturally they'll blame it on Boris. But without him, there seems so little to differentiate the Conservatives from Labour. Of course, they spell Labour funky, but,
Well, yeah.
They're not Canada. You could be confused. Both parties claim to want lower taxes. Both seem utterly unable to navigate the mad woke maze. And both desperately want us to believe they alone have the solution to an inflationary crisis that threatens to sink the global economy, when clearly they don't. But it's fair to say Boris didn't either. But without Boris's charisma and intelligence, now suddenly both parties seem peopled only with the usual chancers and terminally dull corporate-sounding droids we've for so long associated with British politics.
Well, all right.
It's impossible to watch last night's debate without being struck by how unbelievably dreary it seemed. So that's basically their tenor. And when they discuss the debate, they have another headline here: Labour won the Tory leadership debate. Again, Rishi Sunak, who's the ex-chancellor, is the leader, and he positions himself as a Mitt Romney moderate. In second place is Penny Mordaunt, who's a Brexiteer, and Liz Truss in third place, who's a pro-Boris person. So if you're still pro-Boris, you vote for Liz Truss. If you're still for Brexit, you vote for Penny Mordaunt. And if you want to portray your party as bland and inoffensive to anybody in hopes of trying to hold off the Lib Dems and the Labourites in the next election, you vote for Rishi Sunak. Then you have 2 other people running, Tom Tugendhat, who's a bland center conservative, and you have somebody named Cami Badenoch, who is a anti-woke, far-right nutcase, basically.
All right.
Who is now attacking Penny Mordaunt, who's in second place, because Penny Mordaunt once said, trans women are women and trans men are men. And to the far right of the Tories, that disqualifies her from even being a candidate. And they've said so.
Okay, well, it doesn't, but all right.
So she's probably going to be dropping out. Tugendhat is probably going to be dropping out. And so it'll still be among the other three. And this next piece, which Tory leader does Labour fear the most? Labour would like to see, according to the British version of NRO, Labour would like to see Liz Truss because she seemingly no vulnerable personal issues. She stayed loyal to Johnson until the bitter end and is backed by Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries, who were the leading members of Johnson's paramilitary wing.
Oh,
I told you, they're better writers than they are at NRO.
Okay.
That leaves Penny Mordaunt, the candidate about whom Labour has the most misgivings, for she's untainted in the public's eye by association with the Johnson years. Remember, she's backed by the backbenchers. She could be the candidate that spikes Keir Starmer's guns, just as little-known John Major did when he replaced Margaret Thatcher. So they think that Labour fears Penny Mordaunt the most, which is interesting because she's the one most likely to win, according to the odds makers, and the one who's now being attacked for being too sympathetic to, like, real people. Again, why are we going over this in such detail? This is exactly the factionalism that exists in the Republican Party and what they fear by getting rid of Donald Trump. And that's why the January 6th committee has just raised all those fears even more so, between watching what's going on in merry old England and realizing that the January 6th discussions are penetrating the bubble of Fox News. Republicans greatly fear that if they didn't have Donald Trump to rally around, they'd split into the same sort of factions and backbiting and pack knifing that is going on in England right now.
Yes, they would, probably.
So that's with that in background, a couple of things to point out. First of all, the January 6th hearing schedule. The next hearing is this Thursday at, I believe, 8 p.m. It's going to be a prime timer.
Yeah.
And this is the one where they're going to discuss, as Adam Kinzinger said over the weekend, they're going to discuss the 187 minutes that Trump did nothing, and this investigation is not winding down. We may be towards the end of this tranche of hearings. We may have more hearings in the future, and the investigation is still ongoing. That's what you were referring to, is maybe there's a second round.
That's what they're thinking of.
Okay. Another thing that's important, Steve Bannon's jury selection begins today.
Okay.
Steve Bannon, according to Business Insider, is going into his criminal contempt of Congress trial on Monday, that's today, virtually defenseless.
All right, that's fine.
That's because the judge has stripped his defense team of doing all the things that he wanted to be able to accuse and maneuver. He wanted to subpoena all the January 6th committee members. He wanted to make it a circus, and the judge said, no, can't do this one. Nope, this one's out. Nope. So he's literally defenseless, to the point where one of his defense lawyers was trying to leave the team.
All right.
So the thinking now is what Bannon's going to do is lose and then try to appeal.
Yeah. All right. Will he have to wear, or can he wear more than one prison uniform, like more shirts?
I think he wears 9 shirts.
Yeah, like if like
the
9
orange striped shirts. Each one of the stripes is going in a different direction. The top one goes left to right. The one underneath goes up and down. Then there's
can't
plaid.
Go to prison. There's only one shirt. This is outrageous. All right, well, good. I'm glad he's being stripped of all his defenses. I love the story of his defense lawyer trying to duck out because they've lost on all their defenses. I mean, who does the defense lawyer blame exactly for having lost on all the claims for the defenses?
Boris Johnson, of course.
Oh, yeah, naturally.
Everybody blames Boris Johnson for everything. He's in the
your idea. Okay.
Right, so this is from Rolling Stone. Trump tells team he needs to be president again to save himself from criminal probes. The former president is planning on running for the White House and away from the law. I realize not everybody looks at Rolling Stone as a place to trust, but this is Aswin Swin, and he's a very good reporter.
He's trustworthy, I think.
And, basically what he says is that it isn't just anti-Trump people and the liberals saying this. It's his team saying, yeah, he's running because he's afraid of Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice.
We all believe that he ran for president the first time on the same basis. So
now this is something that was from polling from Siena, New York Times, when they were looking at the fact that whatever Biden's political woes are, he still beats Trump by 3 points.
Okay, let's have more.
And this particular thing was highlighted on Morning Joe. If Trump runs in 2024, 16% of Republicans say they'll vote for the Democratic candidate, someone else, or not at all, rather than a former president. In other words, in the 2020 election, if my memory is correct, and it may not be given my age, the Democrats, 4% of Democrats voted for Trump and 9% of Republicans voted for Biden.
Okay.
If 16% of the party refuses to vote for Trump, he's basically doomed. We've had this discussion for years and years and years. Right. Why are you talking to persuadable Republicans? None of them are persuadable. If 20% are, you lose. That's a landslide.
Yes.
It's amazing to think about, but it's true.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe in light of hearing story after story of anecdotal stories of one person interviewed in a diner who says, "I think it's terrible, it's awful, he should go to jail." Oh, would you vote for him? Yeah.
Well, funny you should say that, because I lead off the pundit roundup this morning with Wisconsin focus groups. Wisconsin swing voters say Trump guilty for January 6th. This is Alexi McCammon.
And what? Okay.
The House Select Committee's January 6 hearings are cementing the views of some voters who once backed Trump and now believe he should face criminal prosecution, according to our latest Axios focus groups. Driving the news, and Sarah Longwell over at Bulwark has found the same thing with their focus groups. When you look at swing voters, driving the news, 10 of 14 Wisconsin swing voters last week said Trump should be prosecuted for trying to overturn the 2020 election and his role in the attack on the Capitol. 10 of 13 Arizona swing voters last month said the same thing. Why it matters? The findings follow bombshell testimony from the January 6th committee. The focus groups track with national polling showing more than half of Americans believe Trump should face criminal charges. 8 participants said they've watched at least part of the hearing so far. Several said the hearings were helpful for accountability. Those who thought Trump should face criminal prosecution didn't relent, even when the moderator pushed back and said doing so would be unprecedented. Voters were adamant that such a move would help deter similar attempts. He's our president, and the president should never have done anything to provoke what happened. And here are direct quotes. We have to show other people this just can't be done in future. January 6th was too extreme, and something needs to be done about it to prevent from ever happening again. It just opens a floodgate for what anybody else is allowed to do. Another said criminally prosecuting Trump would ensure the credibility of the justice system is upheld. This is among the 16% who wouldn't vote for Trump if he ran again. They may stay at home. They may not vote for the Democrat. Okay. Yeah. And in Wisconsin, they barely knew much about Senator Ron Johnson. But those who do know him weren't happy.
Okay.
And all but 2 said they neither want Trump nor Biden to run for president again in 2024. So, that's certainly been in the news in terms of Biden's political woes. But I think it's important, again, to point out that the January 6th stuff, whether it's secondary or tertiary, that is to say, you saw it on the news, even if you didn't see the hearing, or you didn't see the news, but your friend told you about it at work. That's the tertiary part. So this stuff bubbles out, and it goes on so long, and it's such an all-encompassing topic that it seeps in.
Okay, then.
So there's a lot of things that are going on in terms of what's going to happen and who's going to win in November. Certainly the House is favored to be Republican. The Senate is a toss-up, which may actually lean a little bit Democratic. And these things matter. The abortion debate matters. Climate change matters. And we'll get to that, too, maybe after the break. But here's, again, another Axios story. This one by Josh Kraushaar, who's moved over there from National Journal.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, well.
Had to change his writing style because now it's an Axios style. Senate GOP fundraising flop. Top Senate Republican candidates turned in poor fundraising numbers in key races from Arizona to New Hampshire. Why it matters. It's as if big GOP donors either don't realize the Senate majority's in reach or wrongly think it's a sure thing. And it's clear they don't like a lot of the Trumpy candidates.
I mean, maybe it's that.
Contact Senate Democrats are posting blockbuster hauls. Republicans could be surfing a tidal wave of discontent about the country, but they're not. What's happening in Arizona, the leading Republican candidate, Blake Masters, raised just $827,000.
Well, no one thinks he's a real person. It's like getting a fundraising letter from a Nigerian prince, Blake Masters. I wouldn't send that money.
To compare to $13.6 million for Mark Kelly.
That's more. That's good. Okay.
And another GOP candidate, Jim Lehman, brought in $1.2 million, $1 million of his own.
It's the
in
point
Pennsylvania,
we're focusing on. Yes.
Another underwhelming fundraising tally from a big-time GOP Senate candidate, Dr. Oz. Mehmet Oz raised $1.6 million. Fetterman raised $10 million, despite not being on the campaign trail.
Okay.
And in New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan raised $5 million compared to $538,000 for her leading GOP challenger, Chuck Morse, who's probably not going to win. I would think they have one of those nutty generals who's running.
I see. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Loud alarm today. Okay.
All right, time to wake up.
Yep. Time to wake up and remember that we have a break coming, but not quite yet.
All right. So Adam Laxalt and Herschel Walker are raising a lot of money, but both are trailing their Democratic opposition.
Oh.
So
Laxalt's been raising money since he was born.
Yeah, exactly. So since before he was born, since his father started
before him. That's all that's going on.
This is a quick thread from Ernest Owens, which will take us to the music.
Okay.
The reason why Fetterman has been successful is he's maximizing all of his resources, grassroots, social media, fundraising, outreach, to sum all this up as successful. Crap posting is intellectually dishonest. He's going everywhere. He's doing everything. He's going to win. This is from Ernest Owens, who's a reporter who follows this stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's looking good so long as the momentum continues, and that's up to all you Pennsylvania voters who all know. If you're listening to this program and you're not coming up short, you'll be there to vote. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We've talked all the way through the break about what we're going to talk about when we're not in the break, and that's now. So, okay, we're back on. Typing is happening. That means something important happening or maybe coming my way. And let's see, we were going to head over. Were we done with the UK heat wave? I think so.
We're done with the UK heat wave, but we're not done with the January 6th committee.
Okay, I had that page open with the people complaining about the way the newspapers and television were covering the heat wave, and I just saw it fly by. I guess the way they do it on TV there, they don't know what do you cover for a heat wave, and apparently on Sky News, I guess the production decision was to go with a split screen, one shot of the sun, like here's what's heating up the earth, that's good, and then a reporter standing out somewhere, in a street corner with a big thermometer, like an old style red liquid, not mercury, but red thermometer, which you can't read on the screen. But so that's how they deal with the heat wave on the news there, on the Sky News. That's the Murdoch channels there. Here's me holding a thermometer. Now, that's the news. Okay.
And it's funny, the thermometer is in fact, but you are all melted.
Right. That's a problem. And then the culprit, of course. There's like the sun is going to get into a white Bronco and drive slowly away. I don't really know what they...
I had to put the thermometer down because it was getting too hot. I couldn't hold it anymore.
That would be something. So, yeah, by the way, temperatures there over 100 degrees Fahrenheit there for all of us who don't know anything about Celsius. But maybe up until almost 110 degrees. I saw 43 degrees Celsius reported there at some point.
It's a problem, said the Brits. The beer is becoming undrinkable.
Now you want ice. You've been making fun of us.
Now you want it cold, huh? Well, that's not the way it works here. So, Peter Strzok.
Yes.
Tweets.
Not in England.
Take a moment to think about the staggering counterintelligence issues in the crazy December 18th, 2020 White House meeting.
Yes, good. I'm glad you brought this up. Patrick Snyder showed me this thread.
In the Oval Office, people advocated Trump illegitimately holding on to power, including using the military to seize voting machines.
Yikes.
This happened.
Yes.
All right. People need to remember one of the things that January 6th needs to highlight is the connection between that meeting and the Willard Hotel, and that's why I think they need more
crazy
hearings.
Meetings,
that part hasn't been done yet.
Peter Strzok, this is his...
Get me Roger Stone and where he fits in all of that.
His thread here. He's the former FBI guy, one of the ones fired by Trump and singled out for being demonized and trying to find something wrong with the way he investigated, et cetera, et cetera. But he's still around. Georgetown School of Foreign Service now, by the way. Okay.
So, Peter Strzok writes, Mike Flynn, who was paid by an organ of Russian state media to travel to Moscow to attend a dinner where he was seated next to Putin, later pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about conversations he had with the Russian ambassador about election interference. Patrick Byrne, former Overstock CEO, one of several men once in an intimate relationship. That's newspeak for screwing Marina Butina.
Yeah, we remember her. The latest Russian spy lady, the red-haired
convicted
one,
Russian agent. I mean, it isn't hearsay.
Now member of the Duma,
or their say, or then say.
Right.
She was a Russian spy, and he was screwing her.
They have hearsay in Russia,
and he's in the Oval Office.
Right.
And Byrne gave money to Butina after her return to Russia, where she ran for the Duma.
Yeah.
Hounded opposition leader Navalny and supported the invasion of Ukraine. Rudy Giuliani, who repeatedly met with and took info from sanctioned Russian agents like Andrei Durkash, despite USIC warnings, U.S. intelligence group.
Yes, community or country club or something.
Yeah, whatever. To the White House in 2019 that Trump's personal lawyer was the target of an influence operation by Russian intelligence. So in this tiny meeting in the Oval Office, which isn't that big itself, where options to upend U.S. democracy were advanced to the President of the United States, there were not one, not two, but three people directly linked to sanctioned and convicted agents of the Russian government.
Weird. Coincidental.
Oh, well, the Mueller report was old. Well, look what's going on here. While I doubt Russia planned it, their efforts to gain access to Trump's inner sanctum succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, and it demonstrates just how successfully seemingly amateurish intelligence activity can be. Ordinary, incompetent gray men can do an incredible amount of damage. The banal, from the Nazi era, the apparatchiks.
Well,
I'm just doing it because it's my job, and this way I get paid, and I got to send my kid to college, so I'll help the dictator. It can be awful.
Yeah, and all low-level idiots that individually were bad bets to pay off for influencing the president of the United States. The guy from Overstock.com, Loopy, Rudy Giuliani, and who was the other one? I forget.
Patrick Byrne, Rudy Giuliani, and Mike Flynn.
Mike Flynn, right. Oh, yes. I guess he was a better bet because he was named National Security Advisor briefly at one point. But still, I mean, they've cultivated 10 different low percentage bets. And what's interesting about it, and I guess this is part of Strzok's point here, is that by some miracle, 3 of the low percentage plays congregate in the Oval Office at the in the last moments of the Trump presidency to counsel him to do something completely un-American and undemocratic. And like he says, I doubt the Russians planned it. There's probably no way they ever thought, well, why don't we get the 3 of these people together and then send them as a united force to the Oval Office. They probably never guessed that any one of them beyond Flynn would make it in there. But let's cultivate all sorts of stupid, low-level idiots, and you never know where they'll go. And especially when,
as Chuck Todd says,
gravitational
it just might work.
Yeah, right. If the gravitational center is Donald Trump, anything could work.
Right.
That's the problem. I mean,
so this is changing directions a little bit, but not going too far. It's an interesting piece in the Bulwark. Jonathan Last covers some of the newsletters that he subscribes to that you don't. And so gets behind the paywall to get to some of them. And this one is by a fellow named Andy Craig, who's writing about how the Libertarian Party went all MAGA.
All right.
Which, when you think about it, people like Rand Paul ought not to be Donald Trump supporters.
Yeah.
People like Rand Paul, a true libertarian, ought to be pro-pot, do whatever you want, doesn't really make any difference what pronoun you use. It's none of the government's business. Leave us alone, yada, yada, yada.
Well,
so he writes, the party's core active membership of the Libertarian Party, it's in the low 5 figures. It's like the size of the Proud Boys or the Democratic Socialists of America. It is a decent organizational infrastructure, a chapter in every state, and it has a history of mobilizing resources in a targeted fashion for ballot initiatives and things like that. And the problem is, the Libertarian Party's become home to those who don't have any qualms about declaring Holocaust-denying racist fellow travelers and who don't think the bigots are necessarily disqualified from the party. They went out of their way to delete from the party's platform its nearly 50-year-old language saying we condemn bigotry as irrational and repugnant. So they got rid of that.
Oh, well, you know.
The caucus also reversed the party's long-standing commitment to open immigration policies in favor of border enforcement.
So
the new chair, Angela McArdle, proclaims that the party will now be dedicated to fighting wokeism.
Great. Because
libertarians
leave people at liberty, right? Yeah. Well, it reminds me of on a larger scale, I guess. I don't know. Maybe the scale's the same. But reminds me a little bit of Pat Buchanan's takeover of the Reform Party.
Yeah, exactly. So people with pronouns in their Twitter bios aren't welcome, but evidently white nationalists and Holocaust deniers are. But that's not all.
Liberty-ish.
Various members of the new leadership have averred that black folks owe America for affirmative action. Pride Month is a plot by degenerates and child molesters. And a country with zero taxes but more trans murders would be more morally acceptable than the reverse.
Okay.
Some of them insist they want to offer solutions to the culture wars, but in practice it means obsessively weighing in on the side of the far, far right. And then Andy Craig talks about, so how did this takeover happen?
How did it?
Why would a party that found its greatest success in offering sensible classical liberal alternative, to Trump's GOP end up being taken over by Trump? And there's two reasons. One is that the party's unique structure, an oversimplified emulation of how the Republicans and Democrats operated 200 years ago, which made it highly susceptible to hostile takeovers. The party's national delegates are selected at state conventions. So, yeah, as you know, when you select things, it's like selecting at a caucus as opposed to a general election. You only get the committed, absolute motivated people to come, and they're not always like the most centrist, shall we say.
Well, yeah, the Libertarian Party was always sort of susceptible to takeover because it's just a low population place. You bring 10 friends and you can take over.
And all of a sudden you outvote everybody. But just because they show up, the votes on key Libertarian Party matters carry the day. And that means that it wasn't hard at all for a group to gin up resources to flood state conventions with its members. It's like what they try to do to school boards.
Yes, they're trying to do the same thing to the actual mainstream, I guess if you would call it what used to be the mainstream Republican Party now. But I guess probably they learned along the way, you can also take over an entire party very easily this way as well when there's nobody in it.
And the other thing that he mentions, again, he's an ex-Libertarian Party member.
The point is, though.
The most active members of the Libertarian Party were incensed, outraged.
Yes.
By Gary Johnson, Bill Weld ticket.
Were they?
Way too mainstream.
Yeah, okay, I could see
and so they decided they were going to take over the party and make sure that something like that never happened again.
Well, it won't this way. That's true. They can avoid that.
So the motives and pattern of behavior, fear, cowardice, cynical political calculation, and appeasement to chase votes in internal party elections. And again, that's one of the reasons why we look at England and what's going on there, that caused the Libertarian Party to succumb to reactionary faction, replicated in miniature the Trump takeover of the GOP.
Interesting.
A party, says Jonathan Last now, reviewing this newsletter, any party is just a vessel, a brand name with pre-wired infrastructure. There's no reason the Republican Party has to be for lower taxes. There's no ideological commitments. What there is power, and a party that believes what the faction currently in control of its power structure believes. So the Republican Party believed in free trade until they didn't. They believed in small government until they didn't. They believed in a robust American foreign policy until they didn't. Because a new owner came in, took control of the apparatus, and had its own set of beliefs, and now the Republican Party believes whatever, who's in charge.
This is all true. I mean, that's a fair view of the way. I mean, it strikes us all as odd because it's been a long time that Republicans.
Well, because the Democratic Party doesn't work that way,
right?
If you have Bernie people come in and try to work with Clinton people, it's not like all of a sudden the Bernie people change their mind and believe whatever the Clinton people believe because Clinton's the nominee. It doesn't work that way in the Democratic Party. But it does in the Republican Party.
Okay. Well,
we don't know what to think, so tell us.
Weird party, I guess. Well, I if it's full of people who, campaign from whatever's in the box, I guess
we passionately believe on
what?
What is it this week? We forgot.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Well, it's an interesting thing, and I guess all parties are susceptible to that sort of change, but only one party they thought it was to their electoral advantage, and for a while it was. Only one party really defined itself by these ideological positions. We're the party of and everybody made fun. And by the way, Democrats ran around for decades saying, we need to have something like that. We need to be the party of, we need to define ourselves, because you get in an elevator with a Republican, they can tell you in 3 seconds, we're the party of.
Yeah, the elevator pitch.
Right. Small government, low taxes, something like, and they had a whole shtick. And now the shtick is out.
Yeah, well, we're a coalition of disparate. I'm already bored. I'm not listening.
Right.
Too long. Didn't read.
So the advantage of it is no one thinks that there's been a strange and sudden about face thanks to a cult of personality taking over the party. But then the disadvantage is that there doesn't appear to be any particular disadvantage to being a cult of personality that's taken over a party either. Not yet. Although now that more swing voters and diners are saying that the personality behind the cult should be in jail, maybe that's a problem. You could have hitched your star to the wrong way, hitched your wagon to the wrong star. Or, for that matter, really, trying to hitch a star to anything, it's going to get you in trouble. Massive gravitational field. Can't be done. You will not survive. It's not the way the saying goes, but then why are you hitching anything to a star? Honestly.
Well, it's not easy.
No. It's put that in the category. I will now object to that saying from now on, like so the meteoric rise.
Bill Pascrell, who's a Congress critter.
On a meteoric rise.
Virtually every Republican in Congress has voted against baby formula, child tax credits, cheaper gas, cheaper insulin, stimulus checks, background checks, veteran cancer care, fair elections, and ending domestic terrorism.
Yes.
That's what you need to know.
Yeah. He loves to point that stuff out. He's very good at that, and he gets a lot of accolades on Twitter and elsewhere for being a bit of a fighter. And I think it's interesting, too, as everybody becomes insistent that means the Democrats need younger leadership, and their ancient leadership is just too boring. Bill Pascrell is no spring chicken. I'll point that out. Of course, neither is Bernie Sanders, right?
Yep.
So there's
John
some exciting olds out there. Yes.
He's a pollster, and he's at Harvard Institute of Politics, took a leave of absence to help Biden with polling.
Okay.
And he does the annual, semi-annual, what a youth vote. People think.
Yes, thank you, Harvard. Tell us.
So per Fox News poll, he's analyzing. It says with 68% of voters under 35
68%
disapproving of SCOTUS overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yes, that's not
youth
surprising.
seeing difference between politics and government can make in their lives. Mm-hmm. So Gen Z and millennials under 35 overwhelmingly support sweeping reform of U.S. institutions. Percent in favor of mandatory retirement for SCOTUS judges, justices, 75% under 35, 68% 65 and above.
Aha.
So everybody thinks that Clarence Thomas should retire already.
All right.
And Alito, by the way.
Thinks that. Okay. Are they of age then?
Well, you know, it doesn't say the age that which they should retire, but like these guys, whoever they are, they're like too old. Like Amy Coney Barrett is too old.
Yeah, right. She's very old feeling.
Term limits for Congress, 73% under 35, 79% 65 and above. Term limits for Congress is a terrible idea, by the way. You lose expertise.
It's been quite a while. You lose Bill Pascrell's every once in a while.
Yeah.
So,
are you going to lose Chris Murphy? That's terrible.
Uh-huh.
You know, you're going to blame him because he got elected young?
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yes, I will do that.
Limiting Supreme Court justices. Every time I see SC justices, I think, what did they do in South Carolina now? Limiting Supreme Court justices to 18-year terms. 67% agree, less than 35, 61%, 65 plus. Get rid of the Electoral College, 61% under 35, 50% 65 plus.
Not bad.
Increased number of justices, this one's interesting, 60% under 35, 33% 65 plus.
That's not a bad number for 65 plus, really.
Right, and 57% don't have an opinion on the filibuster, and what he leaves off, and I don't know, is, okay, how many of you are voting in November? I'm less interested in what you think and more interesting in who you're voting for.
That really, a pollster did not ask that. That is
they may or they may not have. I didn't see the poll. I just saw this flash by this morning, thought the numbers are interesting. But the fact of the matter is that under 35s aren't your most consistent voters in midterms.
Yes, but
we
have
only been around the 65 plus people. We vote every single time.
There's not enough time for
Let that be a lesson to you kids.
It's true. You should vote,
and we would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. So get out there and vote.
Yes, and if it's the only thing that motivates you to get out there and vote, you know it might work to tell you. Well, again, the most consistent voters are those annoying baby boomers that you hate so much. And if you want your society run by them, you got to do the boring thing and get out there to the polls and cast a boring ballot. So I think you can live with that. Free avocado toast to all who do.
Something like that. So in the time remaining, let me just briefly mention just how awful Texas is.
Yes, please.
Let's start with the Texas House report on Uvalde shooting, which blames all agencies at the scene. There were nearly 400 local, state, and federal law enforcement officers, none of whom took charge. They all deferred to Pete Arredondo, who didn't know what he was doing. And rather than isolate blame on Arredondo,
there's plenty.
They blamed everybody. Hundreds of responders from numerous law enforcement agencies, many of whom were better trained, better equipped than the school district police, quickly arrived. Yes. Those other responders, who also had training on active shooter response and the interrelation of law enforcement agencies, could have helped to address the unfolding chaos. Yet in this crisis, no responder seized the initiative. 19 students and 2 teachers died in what took over an hour to get stuff done. Yes. And the videos that were released or leaked showed cops milling around but not doing anything. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's an important concept here because, as you well know, there was a shooting in Indiana yesterday where a good guy with a gun shot the bad guy in a gun, but not until 3 people were killed. Right. And for everybody saying, see, that's the way it's supposed to work, Second Amendment, yada, 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 sort of says, okay, well, that means 3 dead people is, like, totally acceptable. Which
that's
it
what
is not.
Has to happen in order for the Second Amendment to work correctly. Yeah. And then, of course, everybody, right, we're still talking about Highland Park being, you know, for all the people who think, good guy with a gun stops bad guy every time. It's not every time. That's most times that doesn't happen. Plenty of good guys with guns in Highland Park. They just couldn't figure out where the bad guy with the gun was. And even when they did, it really didn't make any serious difference. But it also is the end of the, by the way, the myth of these mass shootings only happen in gun-free zones.
Right, but wait, we're not done with Texas yet.
Oh, yeah, they're bad
so
also.
The AP covered this story. This woman in Texas had started to miscarry but her daughters couldn't perform an immediate abortion because the fetus still had a heartbeat. She lost liters of blood and had to be put on a breathing machine as a result. And direct text from the AP article, with the fall of Roe v. Wade, the art of medicine, and see, everybody's calling it Roe v. Wade. They're not talking about Dobbs. Nobody knows what Dobbs is. The art of medicine is lost and actually has been replaced by fear. So this is an OB named Munoz. Munoz said he faced an awful predicament with a recent patient who'd started to miscarry and developed a dangerous womb infection.
Yikes.
The fetus still had signs of a heartbeat, so immediate abortion, the usual standard of care, would have been illegal under Texas law. We physically watched her get sicker and sicker and sicker until the fetal heartbeat stopped, and then we could intervene. That was the next day. In the meantime, the patient developed complications requiring surgery, lost multiple liters of blood, had to be put on a respirator, all because we were essentially 24 hours behind. And that matches this Washington Post story. Texas sues Biden administration for requiring abortions in medical emergencies.
You mean that
they don't require abortions, they allow abortions.
Yeah. So good luck with that suit. Although in Texas, who knows what kind of judge you're going to draw.
Right. It's not the administration doesn't decide that the abortion is required. The doctor decides that the abortion is required.
Yes. You remember that whole thing about when we had the Affordable Care Act debate and the Republicans in Texas screamed, you can't have anybody get in between patients and their doctors. We don't want the government interfering in that relationship.
The Biden administration seeks to transform every emergency room in the country into a walk-in abortion clinic. And what they should do with every single story, said the indicted for a long time Ken Paxton said. In a statement announcing the lawsuit on Thursday. Now, the suit follows new guidance that asserted federal law requiring emergency medical treatment supersedes any state restrictions. So, requiring emergency medical treatment is not the same thing as requiring an abortion.
No.
It's the doctor who decides whether abortion is necessary or not the law. But if the doctor decides that it's an emergency medical treatment, then it falls under the required emergency medical treatment. That may sound subtle, but it's not the same thing as federal law requires abortions.
No.
It's a ridiculous way for the Washington Post to write that up.
It is, and it's all too easy for them to be confused. I think here's a clearer way of perhaps thinking of it. Ken Paxton and Greg Abbott and Texas Republicans insist that they now want to turn your doctor and every emergency room doctor in a hospital in Texas all have to perform to the level of the Uvalde cops. Everyone has to stand around and try and figure out what to do and worry about the consequences of this, that, or the other thing, and no one will take leadership, and the patients are in danger and could possibly die. But that's the way Ken Paxton and Greg Abbott and other Texas Republicans want it. More Uvaldes, this time in your
you have to step back
office.
and look at the big picture here. You know, between the Texas grid failing because they don't want to put the money in to fix it, and they refuse to connect to the rest of the country so they can be helped when their grid fails, and refusing to expand Medicaid.
Yes.
And what they're doing with endangering women and what they're doing with endangering children, you have to step back and figure that Governor Darwin basically wants only the strong to survive.
Well. How interesting is that for this particular fellow?
You know, it's just awful. Absolutely awful. And again, you know, the question is fine. You know, whether you're talking about the under 35 vote or whether you're talking about a Texas vote, if this doesn't motivate you to get out and vote against these folks, I don't know what to tell you. It's not like you're unaware.
I don't know. I'm not.
And don't tell me it's Democratic messaging. That's bullshit.
It's got to be more than that. I imagine. I wonder if a lot of it has to do.
Can't even be gas prices. Gas prices are coming down.
That's not it. Yeah,
they're close to $4 in a lot of places.
That's what it is. So everybody really wants to talk about the gas prices.
Well, fine. Well, thank you, Joe Biden, because it's like $4 a gallon now.
Well, that ain't great, but you know, it's better than it was.
Compared to Europe, where it's 7. Yeah. Compared to the U.S. when it was 5.
Right.
That's obviously a lot.
True. Well, I don't know what it is.
You want to blame somebody, blame Putin.
Don't
it's part of the Ukraine war.
Don't vote for Texas leaders that don't want to help you with anything. And by the way, I mean, I guess if you wanted to focus on gas prices and you wanted to bring it back around to environment and energy, as nobody, I'm sure people must be noticing now, right? Like the Texas grid failed in the winter, and they said, well, it was an extraordinary circumstance. We weren't really built for that. Texas's grid is really built for cooling in the summer, not heating in the winter. And then now it's summer and it's too hot and the grid is failing, and I'm not sure what this grid is for after all. The only thing we know about the grid is that they won't accept anyone's help from anywhere, because that's independence and freedom. And now they have like rolling brownouts in places. The doctors aren't allowed to help you. The cops don't want to help you. I don't know they're not real good at helping or serving constituencies there in Texas. How do you win this way? I don't know.
So let me just, since it's 9:57 by my clock, let's just give you this piece of good forward-thinking news.
All right.
The AP has this story: a new one-bedroom apartment in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Let's go get it.
Okay. How much do you think that would cost?
San Francisco Bay Area, one bedroom, $80 million.
Under $1,400. With a gym, bike room, and play area for kids.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's very nice. The
Jefferson Union High School District opened 122 units for teachers and staff to help with housing.
Oh, wow.
So they're building it just for teachers.
That is interesting.
The school district is building it.
California, I guess by necessity, beginning to do some really innovative thinking at the governmental level. Between that and, Gavin Newsom announcing, you know what, let's make our own insulin here in California.
I think this was pioneered by the people who sweep forests to get forest fires under control. This is public housing, and it's one of the benefits provided to teachers in Helsinki, Finland.
All right.
Gold standard education country.
Well, it's not a bad idea. And we're supposed to be doing that, copying best practices from around the world.
Yeah, or as Noah Smith said, when did our society get so allergic to raising some goddamn taxes?
I don't know when, but it is the case. Well, it's a great idea, and people will go into the teaching profession in exchange for housing in San Francisco. I think that's probably
absolutely.
True.
I would.
Brilliant.
Now.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio, and so long to Greg Dworkin, who will welcome back on Wednesday. I like that story, and it's a great innovative thought there, or I guess great lifted thought, stolen from Finland. The idea of providing housing, public housing. I hope they upgrade it a little bit. It'll be nice and attractive stuff, but not that they're selling you the unit. Although that might be something to do long term too. Free or subsidized and hopefully attractive housing for teachers in San Francisco. That will definitely attract people to the profession. And wonder if you could work a variant in there, like if you worked X number of years in the San Francisco school district, or hell, any school district, I guess. It depends on how you want to write the bill. But if you work for a certain number of years, if you could convert those into condominiums and own the unit, I mean, think about what a valuable asset that is to turn over to people. If you basically gave them $1 million or a shot at owning $1 million place, because everything's $1 million in San Francisco, it turns out. That's not actually completely necessary to just draw people to the profession, but certainly making housing available is a great idea. And hey, I hope it works out. It's an interesting innovation. And then I haven't spoken about that story, and I haven't grabbed the story or put it aside either, but there was a very fascinating idea anyway floated. I don't know how far along they are, that Gavin Newsom was saying that the state of California ought to get into the business of manufacturing insulin. I don't know whether they would restrict sales to California residents or whatever, but basically not waiting for anybody to either come up with a legislative or market solution for lower priced insulin, but just jumping in and doing it themselves. Quite fascinating, and why not? You should be able to do these things. All right. Well, maybe one day we will turn around and head back down that path and read a little bit about that. Right now, I want to double back on something that Greg did mention. I snuck in the mention as he began reading the Peter Strzok thread that Patrick Snyder had parked that one in my KITM hashtag, and I thought that would be a fun one to add to the mix, and I was all set to do that, and great. I'm glad that this has been taken care of, and we've got that on the record already, but thanks to Patrick for putting that one in front of us. And at the same time, well, no, not at the same time, but at the same time, not the same time that Patrick Snyder parked that. It's about a day ago since he's done that. But while Greg was discussing this, Bosengood sends us this tweet to our attention here. By the way, reminder that he's tweeting now. Oh, you know what? I don't know if I have. Has there ever been a need to put a gender to Bosengood? I guess not. Well, at any rate, now tweeting as, remember, woke mob against gun death. You know how woke that is. But sends this comment. Let me see. I haven't quite read through it here, but while we were having that discussion, the Patrick Byrne connection. Again, that's the Overstock.com guy, who, by the way, is referred to in a lot of the transcripts of the depositions of people who have spoken to either the committee or the Department of Justice or someone in between about the January 6th happenings. People are referring to him as the Overstock guy or the Overstock.com guy. They can't remember. Like, we all originally referred to, what's his name, Mike Lindell, as the My Pillow guy, and we still do. But people have learned his name. The Overstock.com guy, everybody still kind of refers to as that. He's just sort of this weird, anomalous addition to, I mean, My Pillow guy is a weird, anomalous addition, but people have gotten used to the idea that he's just a freak and he seems like he wants to change careers and be not the pillow guy, but the conspiracy guy. But Patrick Byrne is still floating around as the Overstock.com guy. And yet, he's kind of everywhere, and there's really no reason for it. And I guess that's the fascination with him. So what do we have here? The Patrick Byrne connection. That would be Maria, or Marina. What's her name? Is it Maria? Butina. We had trouble with that originally when we first introduced this character. Anyway, it should be, we all need to be reminded, I guess, maybe, because I did. I've forgotten that Patrick Byrne, the Overstock.com guy who, made himself a nuisance and inserted himself in the discussions around the insurrection on January 6th as well, and was present in some of these lunatic meetings in December of 2020 in the Oval Office, that Byrne was actually one of several people prominent in the Republican Party and the NRA, both, who had a physical relationship with Butina this whole time and was, supporting her financially, but also involved with her, as they say, romantically. I don't know how romantic the whole thing was, but it's sexual is what they mean, of course. And I had forgotten about that to an extent. And just seeing that in black and white again was kind of startling. So what's this thread here? The Patrick Byrne connection, Butina, to January 6th awakened, for me at least, a grand Russia theory, a link between the 2016 Russia plot and January 6th. Mueller's abject failure, abetted by Barr and media, emasculated proof of the 2016 Russia connection. And my faint hope is that the January 6th Commission or the DOJ will reveal a link that brings back and confirms what Barr, Manafort, et al. Have successfully hidden, even though it's in plain sight to people like us. After all, the thread continues, why wouldn't Russia be invested in a last-ditch effort to keep Trump in power? Even its failure threatens U.S. democracy. As an aside, I think Jonathan Weissman protests too much about the DOJ not doing enough on January 6th, maybe as part of making up for his and Mueller's failure. It's still inexplicable to me why Mueller did not indict anyone for collusion, other than, if I recall correctly, or obstruction. He had an outrage Trump because of the OLC memos. Even Manafort was convicted only of non-collusion crimes. Trump's broad daylight crimes, collusion, obstruction, Ukraine, pandemic, have to a large extent been swept under the rug by media and institutional failure. That's all true. Not sure there's any material evidence of a 1-6 Russia connection other than Byrne, which itself is not that strong, but hope springs eternal. He gets a little pushback on that and other contributions from other people participating in the thread. But yeah, I see that, and I think I guess we're all in the same place here. There's nothing more to it at the moment, but it is extraordinary given the circumstances, how many people who ended up in the lunatic meetings in December 2020 inside the White House and who actually had Trump's ear. And, having Trump's ear is particularly dangerous because of who he is. I mean, even before there was any inkling of January 6th, for years it was always said that the last person who talks to Trump before he picks up his pen, has got the last word, has got the upper hand here. He goes with the last advice he got. I guess the last advice didn't enrage him anyway. So it's dangerous, and it may very well be the case that Russians were aware of that fact, and that they thought, well, the more assets we cultivate, even if we have no grand plan, the more assets we cultivate, the more likely that one of these dumb assets will be on hand as the last person to talk to Trump before he does the thing or makes a decision or grabs the Sharpie or whatever it is that he does to indicate that a decision has been made. By the way, something I didn't bring up in the last couple of days, do I have specific articles about it? Speaking of his decision-making process and the thing we always made fun of, Trump and paperwork and his ability to execute his decision-making because he doesn't like doing paperwork. Rumors and evidence entered into the record through the January 6th hearings and the like over the past couple days. I think we've made mention of it, but I want to reiterate that the reports are that Trump may have been under the impression at some point that he actually had done what was necessary to appoint Sidney Powell as a special counsel. Remember that was threatened, and we learned very early in the investigations, both the DOJ investigation and the January 6th investigation, that someone had threatened that, essentially, that Trump had pondered the idea of leaving behind Sidney Powell embedded in the Department of Justice as a special counsel to investigate the fake election fraud claims, and how dangerous that would have been and how that would have put Joe Biden in the position of coming in to office as president and immediately being confronted with the need to fire a special counsel, which is ordinarily the sort of thing that triggers investigations and talk of impeachment when a president intervenes and fires a special counsel that is ostensibly investigating something that, it's a lie, but something that the previous administration insisted was wrongdoing by this very person, and using the power of the presidency to fire a special counsel investigating you. And I mean, that was the idea, to set that sort of situation up. But Trump even fails in this because he apparently doesn't do the paperwork necessary to, in fact, execute this decision to embed Sidney Powell. So now it's some question about whether or not Trump really made that decision or whether he was just still mulling it. But the reporting makes it sound like he thought he had done it And it makes it sound like people inside the White House, like Patsy Maloney over there, who knew that it was insane to leave Sidney Powell behind with any sort of power of any kind anywhere, and that she should have been thrown out on her ear from the White House to begin with, that they either slow walked the paperwork or told the boss that the whole thing had been taken care of, or didn't inform the boss that there was any paperwork to take care of, and thereby buried the, nomination or the appointment. And I don't know where in all of that, the truth lies, but it's an interesting possibility, to say the least. And by the way, what does it mean that if the president makes that decision, but the staff slow walk the paperwork, does it matter whether the paperwork got completed but not filed in time, or whether there ever was paperwork? I'm just sort of thinking back to good old Marbury versus Madison. Remember that we're taught, of course, that that's the case that established the doctrine of judicial review, which is, why it's mostly important. But don't forget that Marbury versus Madison, at its heart, at its beginning, was a case about, well, what happens to people that an outgoing president makes a last-minute appointment for, but they don't finish the paperwork in time before the administration changes over? Is the person who the previous president intended to be nominated to office or appointed to office, are they entitled to that office? Or does it really matter that the paperwork didn't make it to the right desk at the right time? And the court's initial answer was, no, that paperwork really means something. Or rather, it's the intent of the president to appoint that person, and they did it while they were still president, so that appointment is, correctly belongs to the person who should have received that commission. But because of other reasons, including, the doctrine that ended up becoming judicial review, we are going to invalidate all of that. But it starts from the position of saying, no, just because the paperwork wasn't delivered by staff doesn't mean that you didn't get your commission. Although I kind of like the bright line of, if the paper makes it to your hand, then fine. You got to draw the line somewhere. It might as well be with, what happens to the official documents. Anyway, not really meant to be part of a lengthy discussion now. Let's see. What other things has Greg sent along here? I got some extra notes at the end here, and I got to catch up on what's happening. Let's see. Sky News over in the UK cancels the planned Tory leadership debate after Sunak and Truss say they won't participate. And I forget who's who now. I only remember their first names. Okay. Tuesday evening's live television debate on Sky News between the Conservative Party leadership candidates has been canceled. It's probably good news for those of you who just want to watch darts on TV or whatever. Two of the three candidates currently leading in the MP ballots, that's Sunak is Rishi, the boring guy, and Liz Truss, but I don't remember which one she is, have confirmed to Sky News that they do not want to take part. And I guess the thing to do is, if you're Liz, is announce that you're going to do a fundraiser for veterans and then, maybe fake that if you really want to do the Trump play. Conservative MPs are said to be concerned about the damage the debates are doing to the image of the Conservative Party, exposing disagreements and splits within the party. Both are very welcome to taking part, I see, in future Sky News televised debates. Okay, I guess that's Sky News talking there. The Guardian has more about that. Starmer says pulling out of the TV debate. Who's Starmer? I forget which one. When you want to be PM, doesn't show much confidence. Okay. Keir, K-E-I-R, Starmer, has said that he is astonished that Tory leadership candidates are avoiding the scrutiny of a TV debate. He said, and I guess now there's the quote, "I'm astonished." There you go. "I'm astonished that those who want to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom are pulling out of the debates and out of scrutiny. I can see, based on what I've seen in the debates so far, why they want to do so, because this is a party that's out of ideas, out of purpose. They're tearing each other apart. Pulling out of a TV debate when you want to be Prime Minister doesn't show very much confidence." Okay. And there's the source from The Guardian, and you can read it for yourself, and that way you can go and figure out who's who and which first names are connected to what. Okay. Oh, yes. All right. Was this a note? Did this come in while we were talking about which one Liz Truss is? The pro-Boris person. Okay. Got it. Well, I think we're up to speed now on the debates. That might not happen. How do you like that? Okay. Let's see. Other items for discussion. There are about 35 to 50,000 things that I wanted to bring to your attention, and I can't figure out which direction to go. But why don't we start with this one? A weekend's worth of developments, discussion, writing, etc. about the post-Roe climate, not in Texas, but in Ohio, where very famously, infamously, perhaps, we now know the story of the 10-year-old girl who became pregnant as a result of rape and needed to travel to Indiana in order to get an abortion, because apparently one of the trigger laws hanging around waiting for the reversal of the Roe precedent kicked in Ohio, which banned abortion after the 6th week of pregnancy, and this girl was in her 6th week, or I guess banned abortion after the 6th week, and she was in her 6th week. But now there's some debate, allegedly, among Republicans there about whether or not the law really applied there. And there's a very convoluted debate about that, and whether it was necessary to go to Indiana, and the 5,000 other things that Republicans have thrown in the way of actually confronting the reality, which is that they've designed a set of laws that do a thing that even they are largely embarrassed by. And there's a rather long piece, but I thought a rather well-organized piece from Anna Marie Cox on this, appearing at NBC News, which is not her usual outlet, but I guess, she's freelancing and doing things all over the place. This is an interesting piece. Ohio's 10-year-old victim forced Republicans to look at their own cruelty, and they blinked. The right's initial skepticism about the Ohio case was bad. The quest to prove the story still doesn't mean what it clearly means, is pure moral bankruptcy. Let me clarify that by reading on. She restates that. That was the subheader there. Restates this in the body of the piece in a way that I think is a little bit clearer. You have heard, of course, of the 10-year-old child and rape victim who was forced to travel from Ohio to Indiana to receive an abortion. The story received mass media attention because it brought to tragic life the kind of horrific, hypothetical case once used to illustrate the possible outcomes of a post-Roe v. Wade America. The right's initial skepticism about the Ohio case, and I think we all know that. We haven't discussed it all that much, but of course, the right wing, which I think it serves sometimes to separate the entirety of the right wing from the main bulk of anti-abortion activists, although they very often overlap. But there's people who are sort of single issue or very nearly single issue anti-abortion advocates. And then there's a wider right wing that may or may not have a genuine interest in opposing abortion, but understands that it is a pressure point to drive politics, and they love to exploit it. And though there's frequently an overlap, sometimes it pays to keep the difference in mind. Anyway, the greater right's initial skepticism about the Ohio case was born of ugly and telling cynicism. Their continued quest to somehow prove the story doesn't mean what it clearly means, i.e. that banning abortion will lead to pointless suffering, illustrates their moral bankruptcy. I think that's a slightly different but slightly clearer way of putting it. Their continued quest to somehow prove the story doesn't mean what it clearly means illustrates their moral bankruptcy. Republicans know their position is extreme and unpopular. Anti-abortion advocates have achieved their victory through a combination of hypocrisy and outright fabulism, assuring more moderate voters that worst-case scenarios are far-fetched and no uncomfortable questions need to be addressed. With Meghan McArdle spent the weekend, tweeting purported facts like, well, only X percent of kids under the age of 11 are even capable of becoming pregnant if they're, whether they're raped or not. And it's like, well, there's no way to get them pregnant without raping them, first of all, if they're 10. And second of all, who really cares? This has really happened. This is a real-life example that of someone who is for real pregnant and needs for real help right now. And to tell me that, well, it's wildly unlikely is not, it's just inapposite to the case. Don't tell me about how unlikely it is. This is happening right now. And also you're wrong about how unlikely it is. And even though it may in fact be the case that only 10% or 1% of kids of the age of 10 are capable of becoming pregnant under any circumstances, however you want to define it. A, so what? This one has become pregnant, and what are we going to do about it? And B, that's still lots of people. And that's a lot of similarly situated people going to be suffering for no particular reason. The numbers don't really help us here. They don't help you, certainly, the way you think they do. And, of course, kids are being raped all the time, unfortunately, in rather startling numbers. So eventually, that under 1% figure is going to result in multiple similar stories. And you can't just go around pretending, well, it's not going to happen. And then when it does happen, say, well, it won't happen again, because it will. Anyway, Republicans, as she says, know that their position is extreme and unpopular. They have achieved their victory through a combination of hypocrisy and outright fabulism, assuring more moderate voters that worst-case scenarios are far-fetched and no uncomfortable questions need to be addressed. Yet, today, faced with the outcome of the laws they supported, this extended round of but shows that those who call themselves pro-life don't care about pregnant women in real terms. They certainly don't care about the elementary school student in question, or don't care very much. Anyone who did would not heap trauma upon trauma by indulging in the frivolous legal actions and inane speculation that's now defined the conversation among pro-life, quote-unquote, pro-life lawmakers and pundits. For many conservatives, those first reports out of Ohio and Indiana cooled the smug afterglow that they've been basking in since the decision in Dobbs. You remember Dobbs, the one we keep forgetting to name. Skeptical grumbling about the details, like Jesse Waters opining that this is pretty incredible, fits a pretty dangerous pattern of politically timed disinformation. Does it really? Quickly became outright denial when Jesse Waters speculates, well, we don't know whether it's true or not, but it fits a pretty dangerous pattern of politically timed disinformation. It doesn't. I mean, the thing is that this is happening all the time. It's just usually doesn't make the news because, one, people want to keep it relatively quiet because it's personal. And two, you didn't need to appeal to a greater audience in order to get justice because you could just go get justice on your own and take care of the problem of that pregnancy on your own without anybody else's interference. And you didn't need to appeal to public opinion about this. But, well, it turns out, of course, that Jesse Waters' opinion becomes quickly inoperative when they realize, okay, this is really true. So now they have to pull out the big guns, at which point it just turns to outright denial. Tucker Carlson deemed it not true. And this is something, actually, I think we should spend a little bit of time on before the break. Just how awful a play it is, right? They played on the fact that there was uncertainty, but the uncertainty was only in their own minds. Well, there hasn't been an arrest, and so therefore there couldn't have been a rape. Well, sure there could. There are unsolved crimes all the time. We discussed this on Friday. But to then accelerate that to, well, that means it's not true. Or worse, for Tucker Carlson to find out, oh, actually there's corroborating evidence, which actually makes it very difficult to sustain the idea that it's not true. So what are you going to broadcast tonight, Tucker? Same thing I was going to broadcast before I found this out. I'm going to go on the air and say it's not true. And I'm just thinking about how manipulative that is, given his audience, who are all out there insisting that they are, in all likelihood, among the pro-life forces out there, and who say, there are even among them those willing to say, yes, this is a horrible outcome for this girl, but this is where I stand. I believe God compels us to do this. And for Tucker Carlson to go out and make a mockery of that belief, don't worry, it's not true. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Ill-timed for the break because I was really building to something here, but this is something I was thinking about yesterday that was really just particularly disturbing. The idea of Tucker Carlson really all by itself. The idea of Tucker Carlson alone is quite enough to drive me crazy. But hey, this time the fact that with all the facts emerging about the case, and the likelihood really from the beginning that this was all going to be corroborated, and then his decision to go on his program and just say, nah, it's not true. Like the whole thing, this whole article is really about the need for Republicans to assuage their guilt here. But there is a position being taken by some, and really, I guess, I don't know, I guess I'd rather it be taken by more, is that there are certainly anti-abortion advocates out there and some just regular right-wing Republicans who find themselves driven by that part of their agenda, who are willing to say, look, I understand that it's unpopular as a position. That doesn't bother me. I may lose my election because of it, and I'm not worried about that because they genuinely believe, or are willing to say they genuinely believe. I feel like I'm compelled to take this position because of my religious beliefs. And it is an unpopular belief, and I'm sorry that it's unpopular. I wish it was more popular, and it isn't, but I'm still taking it because that's my moral position on this thing. And my belief is that, however valid you find it to be or invalid you find it to be, life begins at conception, and there's really nothing else I can say about it. Is it tragic that life can sometimes begin with a conception in the body of a 10-year-old girl who's been raped? Yes, it is. But don't you acknowledge that this sort of terrible outcome is going to be the inevitable outcome of the laws you advocate? Yes, I do. I understand that, and I'm terribly, terribly sorry about it. But what can I tell you? Part of, I don't know, maybe is it all theology, just Christian theology? I'm not a Christian theologian by any means. I'm not any kind of theologian by any means. But it seems to me that it wouldn't be inconsistent with the trials of religious belief in currently or in the past. Several hundred thousands I guess not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of years, not all of which is recoverable to us, but certainly hundreds of years of recoverable history of people, realizing, there's going to be suffering on my part for standing up for religious belief. Maybe it's a good idea to do. Maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe it's something that shouldn't play a role in civil society. I don't know. Differing ideas about that. But yeah, there will be people who will have attacks of conscience, or maybe not even attacks of conscience, but we'll certainly I feel terrible that this thing which I feel that I've been commanded by God results in suffering for anyone. I'm very sorry about that, but this is sort of one of the articles of faith for me here. It doesn't really matter if I truly believe that I've been, compelled to this position by God, is essentially what's happening here. And I find it really particularly disturbing that a manipulator like Tucker Carlson, whose audience depends on, the size of his audience depends on a lot of these very same people, to go out there and say, you know what, you were probably justifying it to yourself by saying, yeah, true religious faith is a trial. It's very difficult. It puts me in a very difficult position, but I'm sticking by my principles here. And Tucker Carlson's approach to all of this is, you know what? Don't worry about it. I absolve you of that guilt. You know what? The story that's bothering you, the story that you're trying to work through, your struggle with yourself and your beliefs and God and what you believe God is compelling you to do, you know what? It's not worth much. Don't worry about it. Throw the whole thing out. Guess what? The story's not true. And now you don't have to feel that struggle anymore. You no longer have to try and resolve your feelings, your emotions about what it means to, in your view, obey God's law. Because those people are lying to you about it. Screw the whole thing. Never mind. And it seems to me like this very, almost like when I was thinking about it yesterday, it struck me as like, exorcist level sort of, God and the devil sort of thing. If you believe in that, the idea that God puts you, through these trials to test your faith is supposed to mean something. And Tucker Carlson says, you know what? It doesn't mean anything. F it. The whole thing is bull. I'll get you out of this. Why would a loving God punish you with trials and tribulations when Tucker Carlson can absolve you of them just by coming on and saying the truth of the matter is not true at all, and it doesn't exist, and you don't have to worry, and you don't have to test your faith, and you don't have to resolve your issues. Tucker Carlson says follow Tucker Carlson rather than God and this terrible test that he's laid out from you. Why would a loving God do that for you? And why would you follow a loving God who would do that for you when you could follow Tucker Carlson, who really loves you, by just saying, I'll just broadcast a sort of gimmitarian theology wherein you're always right and there are no tests. And if anything is standing in the way of it, I'll just tell you it's not true, and then you don't have to worry about it. Just come to the church of Tucker Carlson. Don't go to the tough church of God. It seems very ungodly and very demonic thing to do if you believe in that sort of thing. So I'll just conclude here by saying, clearly Tucker Carlson is the Antichrist. If you believe in the original Christ thing, which is an open question as well. But hey, if you buy into that taxonomy, and I don't, I'm just stealing it from the movies. So the anti whatever it is you want to, the anti God. If you believe in God and the devil, there's an argument by which you might come to the conclusion that Tucker Carlson's the devil. Is all I'm saying. I'm just asking questions here. Anyway, most of them are actually answered in much more organized fashion if we just follow along with Anna Marie Cox and her write-up here. Let's jump back to that, shall we, rather than having this terrible theological discussion that I've mangled. Now that a suspect has been arrested and new details buttress the initial reporting, there's been a swift, if not exactly graceful, pivot to, well, anything else. Anti-abortion Republicans and their supporters are face-to-face with the consequences of the laws they called for, and now they're flailing to find something, anything, that distracts from a dramatic example of the cruelty that abortion bans always create. And I think that's a very important point, too. Right? Oh, well, how many 10-year-olds can, and how many of them will be, yeah, the answer is, unfortunately, a lot more than you thought was true, and certainly many, many, many more than anyone could ever wish, like you wish for zero. And the truth is, these examples always come up. There's always something out there that a ban will create a bad situation around this, and you're just better off allowing those situations to be resolved personally, privately, etc., rather than mandating this one-size-fits-all non-solution for everyone. Well, anyway, these hapless, desperate feints include ginning up outrage at the reported, anyway, immigration status of the suspect. They actually came out with that one pretty quickly. Well, sure, there was finally a suspect arrested, and I just said that this couldn't be true because there was no suspect arrested or charged, and then I got proven dumb by, one, that never being necessary in the first place, and two, there actually being charges filed. And then they said, well, the guy was an illegal immigrant. That solves the whole thing. If we only had been tough on our borders, this would never have happened, except it certainly could have happened from anybody. It doesn't have to be an illegal immigrant. And two, we don't know anything about the guy. We don't know if you're right or wrong. You said this thing didn't happen, and you were 100% wrong about that. So why are we even entertaining your suggestion about the person's immigration status? Not only is it irrelevant, but you were lying before. Now I don't think that there's any reason why you should be credited with possibly telling the truth. Even if it turns out to be the case, it was a good bet not to listen to you this second time. So what else? There are even more convoluted conspiracy theories, as it turns out. Megan Fox is the PJ Media employee who raised social media whispering to the attention of misinformation specialists like the devil, Carlson. She appeared on Glenn Beck's radio show on Thursday to do a round of just asking questions, which I was just doing, right? Except my questions are of a different sort, I think. But, you know, we're all just asking questions. So that was what she was up to last week. On Twitter, Beck wondered who gave this story to the left. These things just happen, but no, they made up a story and then they gave it to the left. It was all planted. Who gave this story to the left? Fox put it out there that the Ohio police may have been covering up the original crime. Who is keeping it from the press, it says here, because they knew the suspect was undocumented. And why were the police interested in covering up that he was undocumented? Because Columbus is a sanctuary city, and we all know how in tune the police forces are with these progressive agenda items like sanctuary cities, which, I don't know, is Columbus a sanctuary city? That might not even be true either. I have no idea. But that's the theory. Well, if Columbus is a sanctuary city, and the police are totally woke, as they are everywhere, then they were probably covering up that the suspect was an illegal immigrant. She also found it suspicious that there was only one reporter at the courthouse to cover the arrest, because all the national reporters are hurrying to Columbus Municipal Court or whatever. Anyway, none of these fuzzy, not quite assertions have anything to do with the Ohio law that forced a child to undergo more torment than was already forced upon her. Imagine, and this is a good point too, growing up to learn that a loud chorus of people first denied your pain and then refused to apologize for doubting it. Not content with potentially ruining one young life, the party that campaigns on limited government, and we learned about how quickly that can switch, explicitly tried to engineer a show trial. How so? The Indiana Attorney General proudly said that he'd prosecute the doctor who performed the procedure for, quote, failing to report an underage abortion, if that were the case, under his breath. But of course, it was not the case. She did reported, but didn't stop the Attorney General from going on TV saying, well, if I'm going to prosecute this doctor for performing an unreported abortion, if that actually turns out to be true, which it isn't. And, but he got a week's worth of press out of it. All of this vamping betrays a central insecurity in the purist anti-abortion position, which is to say, it is unpopular to force children to give birth. It is also immoral. And anti-abortion apologists must know that their position is immoral. They wouldn't agree. I'll point that out. Unless they truly and genuinely believe that no one under the age of 16 ever gets pregnant, in which case, well, they're not, and I guess we would say can't be, part of this debate. It's the rough equivalent of, you said clip, except it's a lot more solid. If you don't know how pregnancy works, or who can get pregnant and who can't, or the fact that a legitimate rape can in fact result in pregnancy, regardless of what you were taught or heard from friends in an alleyway or whatever, then you can't be part of the debate. If the advocates of forced birth were truly confident in their beliefs, and some of them are, they would be proud of what happened to this girl. Or they would, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. They would be willing to say, I think the most you can say is, if advocates of forced birth were truly confident in their beliefs, they would say this is a terrible tragedy, but we have to have it happen anyway. I don't know if they would be proud of what happened to this girl. That might be putting words in their mouth. The law worked, though, exactly as intended. They would at least be proud of the law, I suppose. If they didn't want to force children to give birth, then they really shouldn't support a law that all but guarantees it will happen. That, I believe, is a good and valid point, certainly. That will happen under this law. Well, if you oppose that, then you shouldn't support the law. If you are okay with that, then I guess you can. You're entitled to support the law, but you can't. What you can't do is take the out that Tucker Carlson offers you. You can't go out there and say, well, that's not true, when it is true, and say that that didn't happen when it did happen. You got to go out there and say, it's a tragedy that it happened, and I'm going to be very unpopular for saying this, but this is the way the outcome has to go. This is what I believe. It is unpopular. People will think that it's immoral. I think it's not, but, I'm standing for election based on this, and if it's unpopular, then I'll lose. And the law will eventually change. But for now, the law is what it is, and I think it should be that. There's still room for that. All right, where do we stop? Oh, yes. Indeed, perhaps the most surprising development in this fit of excuse-making is how many on the anti-abortion side are secretly pro-choice. I refer, Anna Marie is saying here, to those who now say that the Ohio law is more generous than the rest of us thought. She didn't have to leave the state. Her abortion would fall under the exemption of life of the mother. Not because the pregnancy was high risk, just, well, obviously it would. And there are a lot of people actually playing that game. Ohio Attorney General David Yost put it this way: Ohio's heartbeat law has a medical emergency exception, broader than just the life of the mother. It's a bit of a silver lining, I suppose. Welcome to the side of the aisle where we believe that life of the mother isn't just defined in purely physical terms. But I don't think that this is what Yost and his compatriots meant to say. I think they're just unwilling to acknowledge that they've been fighting for years to make children have babies. The text of the law they support is clear. It says that the exception only applies in the case of a, quote, medically diagnosed condition, unquote, and warns this definition, quote, does not include a condition related to the woman's mental health, unquote. This is the new position, of course, of the Ohio Republican Party. Well, this whole thing is a hoax because our law really would have allowed for this exception, except nobody thought that it did. Not the doctors, not the lawyers who advised the doctors, and the doctors who ultimately would have to make the decision on whether or not they could perform this procedure without danger of being arrested said the answer is no, we cannot. Well, you were wrong about that. Yes, well, by the time you figure that out, She's now 30 weeks pregnant, and there's nobody that can help her. And that's actually the design of the law, and they know that very well. Plus, they might just be outright wrong themselves. And they might even know that they're outright wrong themselves. They just want to avoid responsibility, taking responsibility for what's happening here. Anyway, the only good thing that can come out of the anti-abortion side, the only thing that can come out of the anti-abortion side's sad performance this week is that it dramatizes the futility of exceptions to the abortion law. Those who want to ban abortion are, again, fully aware of the hypothetical situations where an abortion is a humane action. Exceptions for the life of the mother or rape and incest exist to preemptively assuage their guilt. Certainly, they aren't about providing care to the women in the exception category. If they were, the laws would be written with clear guidelines for providers to follow, and perhaps even, hang on with me here, funds and other forms of support for those women. But of course, there is none of that, and that pretty much reveals their position. Right, so by the way, I don't know if she mentions this in here or not, but in addition to Ohio Republicans now insisting, well, the law doesn't actually require what they thought it required, even though it does in fact require that, and it's pretty plain on its face that it requires her to leave the state. There are also, as we mentioned on Friday, people testifying before Congress saying, well, an abortion to save the life of the mother, like, for instance, in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, is just not an abortion. They just define it out of the problem zone. But they should be saying, no, it is an abortion, because it is one, and that their view is, if it's your view that no such procedures can be performed, then, yeah, you need to own up to it and say it means that pregnant people will die if they have an ectopic pregnancy. We just won't treat it, or we'll delay treatment until it resolves itself somehow, even if that kills them. You just need to own up to that, or else say, yeah, there are exceptions, and not pretend that those things are not abortions. Well, that is true, of course. Oh, I missed one line here. But we left off from Anna Marie Cox's writing by saying if it were true that they really cared about the women themselves, then they might actually give, if not funds for taking care of supporting those women, at least clear guidelines to providers, so that we don't have situations like we have in Texas and now finding state after state where people show up in the emergency room and need immediate treatment, and doctors have to stand around like Uvalde cops saying we don't know what we're allowed to do. So yes, at least clear guidelines could demonstrate. If you feel like that you can't come up with any money for them, okay, fine, sort of. But what about some clear guidelines as to when you can help them and when you can't, and what you can do and what you can't, instead of leaving it up to doctors to have to confer with lawyers rather than their patients. But abortion exemptions, she continues, are not actually about granting mercy. They are about plausible deniability. That is true for all the exceptions. Exceptions for rape and incest won't prevent women from seeking abortions in heart-wrenching and potentially headline-grabbing situations. Advocates for access to abortion sometimes use the example of a woman who is pregnant as the result of incest or rape, but feels unsafe revealing who the father is. Does that seem unlikely among the millions of U.S. women who became pregnant after being raped? You, the one who believes in a rape exception, means no woman will have to unwillingly bear the child of her attacker. You, who believe that, when a survivor walks into that clinic, what evidence will she have to bring with her? Who will get to be the judge, right? You can't just say, well, there's a rape exception, so that means it'll never become an issue. No woman who is pregnant as a result of a rape will have to unwillingly bear the child of her attacker. So stop bringing that up. It's a red herring. Well, let me ask you some questions, she says, about how that will work. How will you prove that you are entitled to the rape exception? What evidence will you have to bring with her? Who will get to be the judge? What if the patient shades the truth in order to get this life-altering care? Who's going to be the one to investigate? Who's going to be the one to blame if somehow the story falls short of what rape means to that person? Whoever the investigator is. How many doctors and mothers will you send to jail? How many state resources are you willing to throw at enforcing this exemption? Will it be more than the state spends on sex education, maybe, preventing the problem in the first place? And what about all those states where abortion providers practically don't exist anymore because these rape and incest exceptions are so preposterously vague that no abortion provider will take the risk of doing the procedure? There are at least 4 such states at the moment. Remember, with each logistical hurdle, with each legal question, the pregnancy continues. All the time you spend, right? Say, well, can you prove that you're entitled to this exception? And what is rape really? And is that, wasn't this one really your fault? What were you wearing? Maybe you asked for it, right? All that time, the pregnancy continues. The possibility of complications grow, and the pregnancy gets further and further along toward whatever imaginary line people draw in their head to define where life begins. Reproductive justice advocates are the only ones who ever ask questions about worst-case scenarios for women seeking abortions. They are usually the ones who deal with the fallout when these laws inevitably lead to broken lives, too. I don't believe reproductive justice advocates are, however, the only ones who know that all abortion bans produce complications. That is what such laws are supposed to do. I believe abortion is a right no matter what the circumstances. Maybe you don't. I also believe you cannot write an abortion law that completely prevents all those situations in which a pregnancy will inflict such trauma that the demand to force birth will seem monstrous. All abortion bans create instances when an abortion is the only moral choice. There will be more headlines like the one out of Ohio. Different grievous hypotheticals will come true. Some already have. If you don't want to read those headlines, if you don't want to be forced to defend abject cruelty, advocating for exceptions isn't going to be enough. The only way to keep your own dignity and your own conscience clear is to acknowledge that no one, whatever age and however kind of pregnancy, should ever be forced to give birth. And that is Anne Marie Cox's conclusion. And bringing up a lot of excellent points here. I was reminded actually in the closing paragraph of one of Greg Abbott's other positions that he took when, I guess, was it when they were pushing the vigilante abortion lawsuit rule, and people were talking once again about the exceptions, and they said, what about people who are victims of rape and who become pregnant as a result of rape? Should they be forced to carry their attacker's child to term? Is that really what you want? And I believe Greg Abbott's answer there was, well, that won't happen because we're going to be tough on rape here in Texas. Why don't we arrest all the rapists? And then that won't happen. But I mean, of course, if you're arresting only, well, let's say you're arresting only rapists in this case. Well, then how do you get to where if you're arresting a rapist, then guess what? They've already committed the rape. If you're attempting all attempted rapists, maybe that would be helpful in some instances, but not all. But if you're arresting all the rapists and the rape has already taken place, you're not going to be preventing rape by prosecuting rape. You're going to be cleaning up, at least criminal justice-wise on rape, but nowhere else. And no equitable justice for the women who were attacked, who now have to raise their attackers' babies, and in some cases now, as others have pointed out, the most extreme outcome of some of the overlap of some of these dumb laws. Not only we have to carry the baby to term, but you'll have to give the rapist parental visitation rights, which seems fairly extreme as well, but it's out there, and they just don't want to acknowledge that, and it's crazy, and saying, well, we'll prosecute rape is not an answer either. Anyway, I thought that was a very interesting article to consider and gave us a lot of interesting jumping off points. It gave us an excuse to say Tucker Carlson was the devil, and that doesn't happen every day. Well, I guess it does happen every day. All right, well, it happened today, and we're glad that we had the opportunity to do that. There's many more stories. It's only Monday, for crying out loud. So lots to catch up on from last week that didn't get through. Lots happening over the weekend. Lots still set to happen. Once again, I remind you of our housekeeping issue, which is that Thursday will be a travel day and an off day, off the air live for us. We'll see. I don't know how we'll deal with it on Thursday, but it's summer and I'm inclined to take the easiest possible way out. Okay, I admit that much. Now, though, for those of you who are still looking to be challenged in your thinking and your news gathering this morning, there's more yet to come, because Justice Putnam comes up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's start early in the outro music and tell you what he's got on tap for you today. Starting off, as he likes to say, in the Bistro Cafe. Kinzinger says the January 6th committee has, quote, filled in the blanks, and this week's hearing will open people's eyes in a big way. I have a feeling that our eyes are already open, but let's open some more, I say. On the rest of the menu, Maryland Dems are eager to break the Republican stranglehold on the governor's office. A survey of state election officials across the U.S. found the expanded use of drop boxes for mail-in ballots during the 2020 election did not lead to any widespread problems. How about that? And a state-chartered bailout fund is seeking to borrow $600 million after 7 Louisiana insurers went bust following 2021's Hurricane Ida. I think we've missed that story, but Justice hasn't, and he'll bring it to you next.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, do I dare read about the overseas news and risk pronunciation problems? What's he got? Thai pro-democracy activists had their cell phones or other devices infected and attacked with government-sponsored Pegasus spyware. Remember that stuff? There's more, of course, from around the country and around the world coming next. Stay tuned.